All right, let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. Now that we are deeper into free agency, we're starting to get more and more data about the moves the Chiefs have made. And there's one in particular that looks absolutely outstanding when you really get into the numbers. We'll hit on that in just a second. But first, I'm Nick. That's Andrew. And this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, talking about the Chiefs, of course, one of the more active teams in the NFL this free agency cycle. They've been trading some players, adding some players, releasing some players. And one new addition to the Kansas City Chiefs has kind of slid under the radar. And I think this has a chance to be one of the bigger steals of any team this offseason. First and foremost, let's get into the contract details, the numbers, and then we'll really go into the analytics on the other side. So let's throw up this tweet here, courtesy of Aaron Wilson. This is talking about the Chiefs signing Elijah Mitchell. The deal is a 1 year, $2.5 million deal, $250,000 signing bonus with a salary, according to Wilson, who can't spell, is 1.4 million. You got 44K per game active roster bonus, 1 million touchdowns, play times, rush yards, incentives, 100K workout bonus. So basically, what this is saying is that Elijah Mitchell is basically playing for pretty darn close to the veteran minimum, which is a very, very tiny cap hit. So it looks like the Chiefs have gotten a quality player at a great discount, but you've got some great numbers, Mike, some really deep in the weeds analytics that really highlight how big of a steal this was for the Chiefs. We'll get to you in just a second. But first, Chiefs fans, before we really go into the numbers, how would you grade the acquisition of Elijah Mitchell? This is your chance before you hear the data to put your feelings out there. You think it was a great move, give it an A. You're not so sure about it, think it's a C. You really hate it, give it an F. Before you go into the data, before we got some great stuff to show you, give us your grade of this deal, and maybe we'll change your mind, hopefully to the positive. But Mize, over to you. What do you have when it comes to the analytics involving Elijah Mitchell here?
Yeah, Nick, I think there's a lot of good stuff to take away from the Elijah Mitchell acquisition for the Chiefs. First of all, that salary, not too shabby. I think no matter what he adds to the team, even if he adds a little bit, which I think he can add a whole lot more than just a little bit to this Chiefs team, I think you have a good investment there. Not too much, a little bit under $2 million for him there. And he gets everything. I think it goes up to around like $2.5 million. Not a bad investment for a contributor on a team, especially at a running back position where the Chiefs, they've been up and down. They have some great players, but when the injury bug strikes, this team can kind of be a little bit sluggish running the ball. That's what I think Elijah Mitchell brings to the table, that spark, a burst. And let's get into this graph I have here, just highlighting some of the stats of what Elijah Mitchell can bring at his best. When we look at this chart, this is Elijah Mitchell's best year, which is rookie season. He has battled the injury bug as well, but I think there's a further point I have to couple with that. But when he's been good, he has been really, really good. So first of all, we see Isaiah Pacheco. I actually used his 2023 stats because they're a little bit better because he was hurt in 2024, which adds to my point. The Chiefs, when they're hurt, their running game goes down. So when we're looking at explosiveness, yards, 10-yard plus runs, that's what a good metric is, to see how explosive a player is, the long plays they bring to the table. You see Isaiah Pacheco in 2023, great, 28 10-plus yard runs. Kareem Hunt, 15 10-plus yard runs. Then you look at Elijah Mitchell here, 31 10-plus yard runs for him. So a little bit better than Pacheco's best season here as far as what he brings to the table there. Then you look at the yards after contact on average. I scaled it up by 10. So it's to make it look not super weird on the chart, but these are actually decimal point in between the numbers. So for Pacheco, 2.9 yards after contact on average. Hunt, 2.61 yards after contact on average. And then you get to Mitchell, 3.44 yards after contact on average. So he's not just explosive. He can get the tough yards as well. Doesn't go down after first contact. He can fight for those extra yards, actually really brings a lot to the table in that aspect as well. Then we get to the final thing. We got explosiveness. We've got the tough, hard yards he gets. And then the final thing he brings to the table is his elusiveness. You see what he does in forced or missed tackles forced. You see Pacheco really great at this. 47 missed tackles forced in 2023 for him. Hunt 31. Then Mitchell brings to the table 42 missed tackles forced. So overall, this guy, he brings a lot to the table, and I think him and Pacheco complement each other so nicely that either of these guys, you now have an insurance policy. One of these guys gets injured, which traditionally it's happened. Pacheco had a couple injuries in the past. Mitchell has definitely had some injuries in the past as well. But you have two guys now that are very similar. Then you have Kareem Hunt, who's a little bit different than those guys as well. I think this was a really strong acquisition for the Chiefs, good future proofing, and a good move to help this team say, hey, we need to win now. We need guys on the roster that fit our budget and can add a lot of value. And I think Elijah Mitchell is exactly that type of guy.
There's a lot of reasons to like this move by the Chiefs. Of course, the numbers are fantastic. According to overthecap.com, his base cap number is $1.75 million. Obviously, there's all the incentives and bonuses we mentioned in the opening there, but he is scary cheap. And again, if you go back to his rookie year numbers, they are really, really darn good. And of course, the only reason that he hasn't been rated such a higher skill and frankly got more money is because of the injuries over the past couple seasons. If he had been healthy, he'd have great numbers. And, if the Chiefs would have gotten him for 1.8 million bucks, it would have been the steal of a lifetime, of course. But they got him for where he is with the injury concerns, and I think this is a smart move by the Kansas City Chiefs. Last offseason, we saw Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry get pretty decent sized deals, and now this offseason, Saquon Barkley got a massive deal re-signing with the Philadelphia Eagles. Prior to that, prior to last offseason, the going wisdom and the correct wisdom in the National Football League is don't spend too much dollars at the running back position. They die young, metaphorically. Injuries are a huge problem, right? You can get quality players for cheap, and a lot of teams believe that. And now we're starting to see teams make the overcorrection. They made the mistake. They saw the Eagles this past season say, oh, we need to mimic that. The reality is, Philadelphia last year, they were the exception, not the rule. Smart teams like the Kansas City Chiefs obviously are sticking to the tried and true principles. Just because it doesn't work out for you one season doesn't mean you abandon everything and completely throw everything out and change your entire strategy. Absolutely not. The Chiefs went to the Super Bowl this past season for a reason. They're one of the favorites to go forward into the future because they make smart decisions like this, not spending too much on the running back position. Dumb teams overcorrect what Super Bowl winners do. They see a team win a championship and they say, okay, if we just did everything the way they did, we'll win. The reality is, you never will be able to perfectly duplicate it because they were the exception to the rule. Magical run, great season. But long term sustained success in the NFL is predicated on a number of principles, and one of them is not overpaying for the running back position. So credit to the Chiefs here for not falling victim to the trap. I would have been surprised if they did. And they got to play here in Elijah Mitchell. And you brought up his numbers here, those kind of advanced analytics looking at the 10 plus yards rushes, the yards after contact, and missed tackles. I think that's going to be a big element of the Chiefs going forward because as they try and figure out the long term viability of the receiving core, Rashee Rice coming off injuries, Xavier Worthy taking the next step, right? The veterans coming in to kind of supplant the gaps there. What's going to be Kelsey's role long term? Who's going to replace Travis Kelsey eventually? They're going to need some running backs that are going to have to take advantage of some heavier boxes until teams really respect the Chiefs passing game, certainly the downfield passing game, a little bit more consistently, which means you're going to have runners that can make people miss, runners that can get yards after contact, and runners that can consistently handle those tough environments. And Elijah Mitchell, working with the San Francisco 49ers, they were teams that no matter how good the 49ers were on the outside, they said, listen, we are going to stack the box to stop that Shanahan running game. Elijah Mitchell, with his time for San Francisco, did a phenomenal job. You brought up his numbers, of course, working through those boxes and being a very productive player. I think he'll face similar kind of defensive alignments with Kansas City, and he'll have to be just as productive with it. And here's the thing, even if it doesn't work out, even if it's an absolute disaster and Elijah Mitchell, God forbid, gets hurt or isn't very productive, you're talking $1.8 million, right? That's nothing in the long term. It's nothing in the short term in terms of the overall success of your team. But the ceiling, the ceiling, the absolute maximum is he's a Pro Bowl caliber player. He's a 1,000-yard rusher. You compare him with Pacheco, you've got a great 1-2 punch. Kareem Hunt, of course, you could have a three-headed monster back there. So the floor is a 1.8 million bust. Who cares? The ceiling is he is part of a three-headed monster that no one can stop, and suddenly Patrick Mahomes' life gets a lot easier. It's high value moves like these that don't get noticed during the March and Aprils, but come fall time, you look at the Eagles with Zach Bowlen being a great example of this, of course. They make all the difference. Credit to Brett Veach and company. This is a solid move. It kind of slid under the radar, but it's a great decision by the Chiefs organization.
Yeah, Nick, and a couple other things to note about Mitchell and just what he brings to the table and the Chiefs' strategy overall here. We see the numbers that their running backs are on now, and we talk about last year. Let's not talk about Saquon's numbers now, but let's talk about last year, especially looking at Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, I think he's averaged at $8 million a year for a running back. All three of these Chiefs running backs on the rosters added together for this year don't even hit $8 million. This is a team that has really spent sparingly at the running back position, and they have three quality guys to show for it. So to your point, three-headed monster at the peak of like, their ceiling of what is able to happen here. We see that old 1,100-yard season back in 2021, Elijah Mitchell. I think there's something to that. I think there's something really great there as well that can bring it to the table. But there's one other point I think people are maybe not seeing because you kind of forget about Elijah Mitchell because he sat out all last season to get healthy. He didn't play a single snap in 2024, elected to sit out the season, be able to go test free agency so this guy could get healthy. So where Elijah Mitchell, he should be at neutral. He should be at zero. He had a whole season to recoup, get better, get back to his best self. So even if we see 50% of what he brought in 2021, I think he's going to be a huge boost to this team. I think there's a lot to come to the table for bringing Elijah Mitchell in.
And if you're looking for a good comp, Chiefs fans, of what you're looking for, almost an ideal, look at Raheem Mostert, the former 49ers running back before going to the Miami Dolphins. Similar kind of career arc, kind of a backup, part of a running back group in San Francisco, has a couple solid years, gets hurt, goes to Miami, then has 900 yards one season, 1,000 yards the next while running for 18 touchdowns. Good receiver out of the backfield as well. That is a clear and obvious model of a running back in the Shanahan system that kind of was cast aside, who went on to do great things, a couple really good years for Miami. I'm looking at Elijah Mitchell to follow that exact same path, and you brought up a great point. He's going to be fresh. He's going to be ready to go. He's going to be a day one impact player for this Chiefs, who have added to their roster. Yet another great steal through free agency.